Hey, it's Bird back at you for some more belt talk, and today we're going to be looking at this baby right here. This is the 1991 to 1994 version of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship title belt, and this belt, actually a really cool story, had to be commissioned because Ric Flair took the WCW World Heavyweight Championship big gold belt to the WWF when he defected in 1991. This belt, commissioned by Reggie Parks, was only held by a handful of guys known as the world champions in WCW at that time. Guys like Lex Luger, who was the first to hold this belt, and then Sting, Vader, Ric Flair when he eventually came back. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Ron Simmons, the first African-American world heavyweight champion. So this belt carries a lot of history, and I'll tell you, it wasn't a belt that I had on my radar, but looking at it now, boy, am I happy I have it in my collection. So let's take a good look at this, the WCW World Heavyweight Championship title belt. All right, diving into a closer look here at the WCW World Heavyweight Championship title belt. A couple things to point off right off the bat here with this belt. First thing you're going to notice is this belt is a little bit different than what you saw on TV. This is a dual-plated version of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship belt. The original being an all-gold version. But to me, the reason why I got this one, it just pops a little more. You know, you've got these stars that are in the negative space here. When this is all gold, it kind of washes out the stars and you lose a little bit of that detail. I also think kind of this sunburst pattern at the top and bottom of the plate pops off a little bit better, and it helps the world banner stick out a little bit more. On the gold version, the world banner to me just gets totally lost. I'm not sure why it wasn't just originally painted black, much like the heavyweight wrestling champion banners. The world banner just, again, it lost amongst all the gold when this is just a full gold plate. So the dual plated version to me looks better. I think it just shows off the detail of this belt. You can see there's a significant weight to this belt. And I don't just mean like in terms of heft, but I mean like when you look at it, it just looks significant. So the dual plating, in my opinion, really makes this belt pop, and it sets it off a little bit more. Just take a nice look at this belt. This belt is really big. It's really heavy. And it's got some similarities, if you haven't noticed already, to some other really prestigious belts. And so what I'm referring to is if you look at these side plates, what do they remind you of? That sunburst pattern and the shape reminds me of the WWF Classic Winged Eagle Championship belt. Being that it's a Reggie-style belt, you know that you're going to be getting what looks like a championship, something of prestige, something that matters. So let's take a nice close look here, kind of set in on this main plate a little bit and try to capture some of that depth that we have on here. This belt, again, made by a maker that I think probably was in Pakistan, but they did a pretty good job in terms of capturing the detail work. This belt, I don't want to say it's a simple belt, but it doesn't have a lot of the intricate details that some of the other Reggie belts have. The depth on this belt is really good. You can see how the stars pop out. You can see the depth in the sunburst patterns and on the globe. Everything just looks really nice. Same with the side plates as we move down the strap here. We're looking at plates here that are 4 millimeters thick, or right around 4 millimeters, which I think, in my opinion, should be the bare minimum in terms of plate thickness. It just gives the ability to put so much more depth and detail into the plates. As we kind of work our way down the strap here, you'll notice, again, like I mentioned before, these sunburst type pattern side plates that are very reminiscent of the WWF Classic Winged Eagle belt. You've got the grapplers flanked by the globe that surround the main plate, and identical obviously on both sides here. And working our way down the strap, we do have a 6 plate, a property plate, and a full belt tip. Now, I believe the original WCW World Heavyweight Championship title belt did say, I believe, WCW Champion on the belt tip. We're missing that here, but again, one of those details that was overlooked by the maker. The other thing that we see, though, is we've got a nice full leather strap on this, and it's got the croc style backing. You've got the clamshell tool work around the plates. And then you've got the tooling in the snap box, both sides. I will say that this tooling in the snap box on this belt does seem to be maybe a pattern or a stamp versus hand tooling. And I do think that, yeah, over here by the property plate, similar to the 5-plate United States Heavyweight Championship title belt that I have of this era, this side plate on here is a little oversized. It should be sitting in kind of a recessed or beveled tooled area on the strap. So another small detail here that we missed the mark with by the maker, but overall, not going to complain too much about that. This belt tip, very heavy, gives the belt that floppy quality that I think a lot of belt collectors love. You don't get the same amount of pliability over here on the other side just because we're missing the weight, but a pretty soft strap overall. I will say that the quality of this leather, though, being that it is a knockoff bootleg belt, is the quality just, you know, the belt, it's a little thin, and what we're seeing on this particular belt is the finish work not so great. So we didn't burnish or seal the edges. We've got some of the glue letting loose on the back of the backing here. So we're seeing some peeling take place on this strap. But for what I paid for it and knowing what I was getting, that stuff can easily be, at least the backing can be easily glued back on. I'm not going to take the time to burnish or finish the edges on this belt. It's just going to sit on a display shelf in my house, so I'm not too worried about that. It's not going to see a lot of handling or play, but what I will say is I'm just so pleased with the look of this belt. This belt was never really on my radar until I watched a couple of those classic matches between Vader and Sting and Vader and Ric Flair, and one of my all-time favorite heels of this era was Big Van Vader. He was just so big, so mean, so nasty, so violent, but he was so agile and so quick in the ring. He could do a lot that other big men couldn't do, and it made him so dangerous. And this belt, when I think about this version of the WCW Heavyweight Championship, I think of Vader first and foremost, and all those baby faces that had to contend with him to try to win this. So whether it was Ron Simmons, whether it was Sting, or ultimately Ric Flair, who I believe was the last one to hold this version of the belt, Vader just set the tone and carried this belt in a way that made it significant and made it mean something. Being that this belt wasn't on my radar, and then I happened to see it come up here for sale locally, I am so happy that I picked this bad boy up. And I'll tell you, it's heavy, it's significant, and again, going back to those feuds with Vader between Ron Simmons and Sting and Flair, it's a significant title belt. And this belt particular holds that history or that lineage and the legacy that Ron Simmons set by being the first WCW African-American heavyweight champion for that organization, paving the way for guys like Booker T to continue to just break barriers. This belt has a lot of significance in the wrestling world, and I'm happy to have it in my collection. So I'll tell you this version of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship title belt, it's big, it's beefy, and for the short amount of time that it was in use, it meant something. Guys like Vader and Ron Simmons just give this belt so much credibility. And then you have that lineage with guys like Sting and Ric Flair who just put their shine on this title. I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to pick this belt up and add it to my collection. And I hope you enjoyed taking a closer look at this belt with me, the 1991 to 1994 WCW World Heavyweight Championship title.